Richard F. Huck. Richard Huck was only 19 years old when he and his 3 siblings took over ownership of Huck Manufacturing upon the death of their father in 1913. He and his twin brother Paul had been attending St. Francis Academy and suddenly found themselves in management. Born July 25, 1894, Richard and Paul each served as president of the company for a time. Richard's area of expertise was finance. Their sister Marguerite, or Nan as she was known by family members, served as secretary-treasurer, and brother Ted was the engineer. They were the 3rd generation to run the family business.
Titles were not real important to them. They were very modest people, but very bright. They all took their place in the company in important positions, but they were very understanding of one another, of what their responsibilities were. And so you would have hardly known there was a number 1 leader because they all worked in tandem. And that's very unusual, or maybe not so unusual, but it's something you want to see when it's a family affair, that they get along well together, and they did indeed do that.
Huck Manufacturing was founded in 1890 by Richard's father and grandfather as a small woodworking shop. In 1934, the siblings purchased a manufacturing plant at 10th and Vermont to expand their custom-made showcase business.
They were building pharmacies and the types of showcases that you would have in most retail stores. I have a number of old catalogs, and they were really doing some pretty high-end Art Deco, even some maybe Art Nouveau influenced things, some traditional pieces and that, and it was all handmade. The company was all about the fact that they had these amazing German craftsmen.
Showcases were built in solid oak and mahogany with nickel plating on the corners. Huck's reputation spread throughout the Midwest, and soon 50 German craftsmen were employed to build showcases for retail stores in Texas, Indiana, Michigan, and throughout the Midwest. In 1923, Huck Manufacturing acquired as a customer the S.S. Kresge Company.
Kresge's was going through this new kind of prototype that they were developing, and they did it in Sioux City, Iowa. So they brought the Hucks up to Sioux City and basically had them lay this thing out. It really worked for them, for S.S. Kresge, and from that basically evolved this long relationship where they said, well, that worked pretty well, let's look at another one.
As Kresge's grew and eventually became Kmart stores, so did Huck's, and another move was necessary. This time, Huck and his siblings moved the company to a manufacturing plant on the corner of 28th and Chestnut, its final location. By 1952, Huck Manufacturing made half of Kresge's store fixtures, and by 1966, 75% of the fixtures were made by Huck, and the rest were made from Huck Designs. In 46 years of work with the Kresge firm, Huck Manufacturing furnished over 500 stores. At its peak, the company employed more than 300 people.
There's a S.S. Kresge news magazine they would turn out all the time. That talked about how in the 40-some years of relationship, they'd never missed a deadline. And being in the construction, architecture, development world, I understand what that is. You know, if you don't get equipment and materials delivered on time, you know, everything else just falls behind.
They cared about their employees. They made sure that they were taken care of. And so the quality came from satisfied, happy customers and happy employees. And when you got happiness, you got success.
While the company thrived, Huck's personal life was not as easy. He married Marie Heinz in 1920, and she died just 6 years later after blessing him with 1 son.
You know, I think Richard in the end, you know, again, having lost his wife at an early age and not remarrying, I really think that the firm and then the community of Quincy as a whole was his family.
He was interested in just about everything. He was generous to a fault. I called him sort of the front man. It was really entertaining to go out with him, whether you were at the Coach House restaurant or, the country club or church or whatever, he was always talking to somebody. I remember asking him, who was that guy you were talking to? And he said, oh, that was the janitor at the church. He knew him well. He was a real gentleman, and he wore that role very easily.
Huck Manufacturing was sold to the Kresge Company in 1969, but Huck's involvement in the community continued. He was a member of St. Boniface Church, Holy Name Society, Fourth Degree Knights of Columbus, and the Quincy Country Club. He was a member of the St. Mary Hospital Board and served as general chairman for the Catholic parish phase of the Notre Dame Catholic Boys Fund Drive in 1972.
Well, one of his biggest projects was his interest in the north part of Quincy, of course, where Huck's was involved, but there was also important other industry in the area. But what is interesting, he was also interested in the growth of the area as it related, for example, at the end of World War II, by 46, there was excitement about maybe there was going to be a shopping center, the new kind that were springing up all over the United States. He was a supporter of that. He got very involved in wanting to see a bank on the north side of town. It was only natural you wouldn't be able to walk to your bank, and there was not going to be any bank there to serve, and he knew this was going to be important. So he was one of the founders, directors of Broadway National Bank. It didn't happen all at once, but over time, it was people like the Huck family that were there quietly making things happen behind the scenes.
In 1970, Huck was honored by the Industrial Association and the Quincy Chamber of Commerce for community and industrial leadership. He was also a recipient of the Solano Medal of Honor from Quincy College.
He was always the one who would sit back and listen, and then at the end he would have something to say. Now, in a casual conversation, there was back and forth, but in anything that was important, he wanted to hear what everybody had to say, and then he would offer his opinion.
Huck died February 21, 1980.